relates to scalability, algae, again, it's one of the policy questions that everybody in this room should be asking is, can you actually scale the technology to meet the demands that we have? We use 15 million barrels of oil every single day in the United States. And so if you can't scale to meet demand, it's really just a very big, expensive science project. And we hope not to be a very big, expensive science project. So scalability is important, and I just, one of the sort of key markers that we have is, can you displace about 15% of the U.S. transportation fuel? And as it relates to land use, I think it's important to lay out, sort of how this would look vis-a-vis other technologies from, getting biomass from trees or corn or switchgrass or stovers or various other forest waste. And you can see that how this lines up in comparison to the overall yield of those various technologies out there. And by the way, I must say that we face such a serious problem related to energy demand and its growth in the United States and the world that we need to do all of this. It's not just algae versus other things. We need to do a lot of different things here in order to keep up the pace of our energy needs. And you're going to get a long ways with efficiency, but you're going to still need a lot of energy to run this economy. So as it relates to our IP position, our intellectual property position, before we launched the company, before we even revealed that such a company existed, we spent an entire year funded by those folks that I mentioned to go and probably the best way to put it is do a land grab on the technology that we had discovered and developed around algae, and we now own about 45% of all the patents in the space, and we clearly own 3 times more than any other individual company in the patent space around algae. And it's not just broad patents, but also very specific focused patents along the entire value chain, from the platform to the traits that algae contain or that we create, the production systems, and the refining methods and the products that they ultimately result in. So patent portfolio is an important part of why we've been able to raise the investment dollars we have, because investors are looking for a secure ability, and they're looking for companies that have what's considered freedom to operate, so that we aren't going to run into a very uncomfortable situation as we begin to roll out our technology with having to litigate the patent issue. So, as a company like ours wouldn't normally have a Tim Zenk at our stage of existence, but our board of directors are fairly sophisticated in the business of public policy, and they understand that energy and public policy are kind of one of those unique places in Washington in particular, that there's an intersection between the two. And without public policy, there is no energy system. And so energy systems and public policy are uniquely related. The policies that are established here or aren't established have a direct impact on the future viability of these industries, in particular liquid transportation fuels. It's been dominated by the guys that do fossil petroleum, all well and good. But today there's this intersection of biotechnology, agriculture, and energy that I focus on. And in 2007, when we kicked this story off, we were unknown. The business of algae, ESA 2007 had just been worked on. There was very little public policy around. There was no framework to work with algae within the Farm Bill or within the Department of Energy or any other funding mechanisms. There was not parity with other even biofuels. So, for example, cellulosic biofuel or ethanol or biodiesel all had tax incentives and advantages that we today still don't have. And so my job is to focus on the public policy matters and to really look for parity, ways to make it our freedom to operate and our ability to compete on a fair and equitable basis, not just with other biofuels, but with the traditional fossil industry as well. So as we identified some of the sources of policy things that we needed to address, we began to make some progress. And over the last couple of years, 2008 to 2010, have been watershed years for especially algae, where we've made pretty significant progress on, sort of creating a policy framework that allows us to compete in a fair and equitable manner. And so, there have been a number of areas that are really important to our success, and I can just kind of go through some of these. One of the most important parity issues that we have been working on is in the tax code, whereas a number of biofuels receive tax parity. It's a bipartisan issue, by the way. We have just as many Democrats supporting us on this tax issue as we do Republicans, and in fact, it's kind of a very heartening thing that we've been able to sort of pull that coalition together. And so to that end, there have been 10 tax bills introduced to give parity in the renewable fuels standard, RFS, as well as a tax code for algae. It ended up at the very end of the last Congress at the bar of the Senate, but it came over under unanimous consent and required under Rule 14 of the United States Senate requires all members of the United States Senate to concur. So that didn't quite happen, but nonetheless, it was passed out of the House Ways and Means Committee last year under unanimous consent, which is an amazing feat as well. Some of the other policy issues that are really important to us is what does the Defense Quadrennial Review say in relation to biofuels, in particular dense hydrocarbon fuels, and the last Defense Quadrennial Review made a statement about how important energy supply is to the strategic needs of the nation. President Obama recently issued a policy position on advanced biofuels, transitioning the nation from first and second gen fuels to third generation fuels. It's called Growing America's Fuels. You can go find it at the USDA and the White House website if you're interested. Other areas I talked about are the renewable fuel standard that are important to us as well. And this is a depiction of the policy that was instituted recently by the administration on moving the nation from first, second gen fuels to third gen fuels. We think that's a good direction for the country to be going. Just some quick highlights on the algae space in particular. There's actually been quite a bit done in the last several years. There was a 2-hour test flight with a brand new 737-800 from Boeing. We provided the fuel for that flight, 2.5 hours flying around Houston on a Continental Airlines jet. We've driven cars across the country on gasoline made from algae. There have been tests both at the Navy and the Air Force on various airframes that they're certifying these technologies on, and there's been significant funding of research and development projects by the Department of Energy and the USDA over the last several years. So things are moving in the right direction. I can say that as it relates to the House of Representatives, there's an algae caucus that was formed here that's chaired by Mr. Bilbray from San Diego. We're very appreciative to Mr. Bilbray for his leadership on a number of these issues, from tax parity to the renewable fuel standard. It's co-chaired by other members of the House as well, and there are a significant number of members that have joined the algae caucus as well. So as it relates to the government's alignment with algae fuels, I mentioned the QDR as one of the indications that this is important from a strategic perspective to to the U.S. Department of the Navy and the Air Force and Marines, of course. They've all issued very significant goals to be achieved in the area of biofuels. Obviously, algae will play a big role in that, but not the only role, as well as DARPA's investment in the technology, and that's General Atomics, another San Diego company, benefited by DARPA's investment in that technology, and they're moving along very rapidly in the development of their technologies. Department of Energy, USDA, White House, and the EPA have all come along on sort of aligning their policies with the technology that's being developed out there. And then finally, what are our national policy objectives? And I think it's important to sort of point out that we're focused on dense hydrocarbons, and those are the fuels that are molecularly identical to gas, diesel, and jet. And tax parity is an important component of getting there, as well as the fair accounting of CO2, because the number one source, the number one feedstock, you might think it's algae, but our feedstock is really CO2, significant quantities of carbon dioxide. So anthropogenic CO2 from industrial sources are actually very expensive to get, believe it or not. So we need a fair accounting of that in the process, so that when we use CO2 in a process, we aren't considered emitters, which is the current law. So we're working away at that, and then also and finally, sort of a robust regulatory framework that allows us to operate and offers us certainty. So with that, I'll leave it at that, and we'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you.